Hello there, friends. Welcome into the Husker247 Podcast. It's been a while since we've actually done one of these. It isn't the Hypecast. We just want to let you know that we still exist. I'm Mike Schaefer, joined by Michael Bruntz, Brian Christopherson. You both seem very confused by that opening.
Yeah, that was something.
BC's still stunned.
It was kind of golf announcer-ish. Yeah, you're
I'm sorry.
Nance. There's only one Jim Nance, buddy.
I wanted to be warm and inviting and let people know that they can still listen to this podcast, even though we've been somewhat erratic for the last month.
We're here when it counts. We're in season. We're ready to roll. Doesn't matter what we did in camp. It matters what we do now.
PC's not taking any of your anger. He's letting you know that we're here. That's what matters.
Sick of the general public riding our butts.
Yeah. All right. Nebraska lost to Minnesota. That was last week. We're going to discuss it a little bit. We'll get the ball rolling for this Nebraska-Colorado matchup that you may or may not have heard. It's happening on Saturday. Big noon kickoff on Fox. On Twitter, there's a way that you can mute certain phrases. So you don't have to see Taylor Swift or whatever if you don't want to. But on your television, it's going to be really hard to mute every time they say Coach Prime. So just be prepared for that at home, unless you just mute it and sync it up with the Nebraska radio broadcasts. Some people do that. I will not be one of those. But Nebraska, Colorado this weekend. Before we get there, real quickly, each of you give me a thought, leftover thought. Nebraska, Minnesota season opener. Bruntz, go.
Yeah, I did my second rewatch actually last night of the game.
Second? How many do you get in through a week?
Usually I get two in. I don't know. Defensively they played even better than I'd kind of thought. Like I really was pretty impressed with the changes that they made after halftime and kind of what they were able to get done against Minnesota. I mean, they really took away what Minnesota wanted to do, and I know that Minnesota was going to do things a little differently this year with personnel and whatnot, but they really did a nice job there. Offensively, it's about what I thought. I mean,
was it worse than it looked in person? Offensively,
yeah. Jeff Sims kind of papered over a lot of issues. The thing that is going to need to have some work this week is that they're going to need to figure out some kind of short passing game because it just wasn't there. Something quick. I thought your piece this week on the site and finding good throws for Sims, I think that's helpful. So yeah, that was kind of my second time around takeaway.
BC, what do you got for us?
Yeah, nothing that nobody's talked about. I guess Ethan Piper, I thought was interesting yesterday and kind of laying out, if you want to look at the glasses being half full of Kool-Aid for the offense after the first game. And before that's just dismissed, I thought it was interesting when you think about they actually did run for 209 positive yards in a game where in the first half, they barely had the ball. It was so disjointed. The new clock rules are part of that, but it was also, the defense, as well as they played, they struggled to get off the field on third down. So at one point on the stat sheet, Minnesota had 32 snaps to Nebraska's 13. And that was with like 4 or 5 minutes left in the first half. And when you consider of those 13 snaps, the first drive started at the 1 yard line where you're just trying to get it out of there and basically do what they did, and it was sort of a win. They actually were pretty good on the majority of 2 of the 3 drives. Now, I know you'd say, well, they didn't finish, they didn't score points, and that's what matters. And so that you got to make those plays down there, and it's going to come down to, can Jeff Sims avoid those 2 to 3 mistakes to me? But I get where Piper's coming from, that I don't think the offensive line and the offense walks out of that first game just shattered in confidence or anything. They actually went, I think, and looked at the film and thought, like, we were kind of meeting the formula we had going in. We just have to clean up some of these mistakes. Now, whether they can or not in this type of setting, I'm not sure. But I did get Ethan Piper's point, and I think it's if you want to be optimistic heading to Colorado about the offense, I think you could find some things there if you scan it long enough.
Bruntz, whose face comes off the milk carton first out of these three players? We're going to 3 different positions here. Ramir Johnson at running back. He had a very limited role in Thursday's contest, but he did have that big kick return. You have Thomas Fidone, 30-plus snaps, maybe one target, no catches. And then Billy Kemp, the thought to be Nebraska's top wide receiver, no catches in this first game. If you were going to pick one of those guys to come off the milk carton this weekend against Colorado, which way are you leaning?
Was Gabe Urban off the milk carton already? He wasn't an option?
He had enough. He led the team in rushes, non-quarterback. Yeah.
He had about as many touches in the first 3 quarters as Ramir did.
Yeah. Well, he played in the fourth. Quit trying to take apart the question and answer the damn thing.
I would say Irvin first, but I will go with Billy Kemp. I will not go with the premise of your question, but no, Billy Kemp.
Your petulance is noted.
Yeah, they've got to find a way to get Kemp going. I didn't think that the routes that they were trying to find him on necessarily fit kind of what they needed in that game against Minnesota. If they're going to try to control the ball, I think it's got to be a lot of shorter stuff. And I think that's the area where, he can shine. I mean, he's not going to be a guy that's going to go and catch deep balls. And Nebraska's going to have to attempt a few of those. But I think Kemp has to be involved in some form or fashion. I mean, you saw how different the offense looked when Marcus Washington was just in the game and actually a threat to catch the ball. I mean, it made a difference. And, Kemp was only targeted twice in that game. They need to find ways to get him clicking early. I would have probably, if you would have told me that Billy Kemp didn't have a catch in the first game, I would have bet a sizable amount of money that you'd be wrong. And I think part of it was what Minnesota was taking away. And I think part of it was just Nebraska really wasn't looking for him that much. So I would go there, I think, as a guy that emerges as has to emerge, I think, for this offense to click a little better.
On the rewatch, was Minnesota largely just trying to take away the short passing game, kind of funnel Nebraska to open up the box a little bit?
Well, I don't think Nebraska ever did enough to get him out of the box. I mean, it was kind of a mess. The safeties were creeping up. I think part of it too was, I just didn't think that Nebraska did enough, route wise of guys getting open to really take advantage of what Kemp does. So, I mean, all fall, we heard about how, crucial he was going to be to this offense. And I think you saw what happens when you don't get him involved. So that's where I look.
BT, nobody's talking about Gabe Irvin. Nobody seems to want to talk about Gabe Irvin. Yeah, that was directed at Bruntz.
Some of us are talking about Gabe Irvin.
No, we were going to get there, but you have to answer the question that is asked. That's how this works. All right, Brian. The running game, it was a struggle beyond Jeff Sims. What did you see from the running back specifically? What do you think kind of happens moving forward with a Colorado game where it seems like it would behoove Nebraska to really try to control the ball and probably keep it on the ground?
I think we're going to see a lot more Gabe Irvin. Not positive of that. It's interesting because you got to be careful. You can't just throw a guy away because there was a fumble. Like, I know Grant had the fumble issues, but it's not like he's off the roster. And so, because this week, that was kind of the conversation where it basically moves like, well, you got Gabe now, and that's it. I don't think it's going to work like that. Anthony's got to come back from that and contribute some carries and, be dynamic when he has the ball and hang on to it. But I do think it could, outside looking in thought help Nebraska if they could get a specific running back going for 2 or 3 series in a row, as opposed to sort of this guy here, this guy comes in on second down, and it's just like 3 different guys on that particular series. I'd love to see a drive in this game where Nebraska takes it 13 plays and the running back is Irvin for 9 of them, or something like that. And there's a 4-yard gain, a 7-yard gain, that sort of stuff. Now, I have to think going in, Nebraska is going to want to test Colorado up front more than TCU did, just in a bully type fashion. Like, hey, this game's going to be decided in the trenches. We're going to come right at you. If you can stop it, we'll tip our hat and you win. But I do think it's going to be a lot more I-back centric than it was. But I also think, you know what? You got to do what you got to do to win. And it's always easy in June and July to say, oh, they can't run Jeff Sims that many times. When you get in the game and you're trying to survive and be on top and that's working for you, I get where that could be very difficult to not run Jeff Sims 20 times in this game if he's the threat he was in week 1 again. So I'm not against it necessarily this week if that's what it takes, because I think this is a huge game for Nebraska. I just think this is a game where you can really tilt things back toward a very optimistic point of view going through this season. It would get that streak against ranked opponents off the table. That's 21 games straight they've lost there. It would knock down a neighboring rival that's feeling good about themselves. So this is a perfect setup for Nebraska because it's like one of the biggest stages you can be on for a football game. How many people are going to watch this? And yet it's not a game that's beyond their reach that they could, they can win this game. I really think that. So that it's a perfect setup right now. Rule couldn't ask for a better setup, I don't think.
Bruntz, what impressed you the most out of Nebraska's special teams on Thursday? I mean, it felt like pretty much everything they attempted to do largely worked, whether it was the coverage unit, whether it was the big kick return from Ramir Johnson in the third quarter. Brian Buschini had a good game. Tristan Alvano made his kicks during his appearance. What stood out for you?
Yeah, I don't know that it could have gone much better for that group. I mean, I'm trying to think back. Was there even a play that you would kind of circle as like, oh man, I can't believe they did that? Like it.
And I was part of it. Sort of the just general mocking of that first kick return got to like the 19-yard line.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean,
and then that gets washed out immediately in the third quarter when it's like Ramir gets to, what was it, the 35? Like he had like a 65-yard return. So I guess you take the not so good with the pretty damn great. So you live with it.
And they, I even thought the way that they played the field position game, I mean, it worked out well. I mean, that first offensive drive where you're pinned back on the 1-inch line, and they successfully flipped the field. I mean, that was a big play in that first half to keep Minnesota's momentum kind of at bay. I thought Buschini was good. The kickoffs were fine. They rotated a little bit, I noticed, with who was handling kickoffs. And I don't know, I mean, even looking at the coverage units, I mean, I felt like they had a pretty good mix of starters and kind of second team guys. I thought that they kind of the attitude that they were playing with, it seemed to kind of exude confidence. And I don't know that special teams has done that with any kind of consistency at Nebraska in quite a while. It's always felt like, let's go out there and let's try not to screw this up, is basically how the approach has been. And I thought they did a pretty nice job of, being a net positive for the team in that game, even though they fell short.
Let's transition this over to more Colorado centric. PC talked about it a little bit. Big opportunity ahead here for Nebraska. Did both of you, did none of you watch the Colorado TCU game? Who watched?
I was at a wedding, delivering a humdinger of a best man speech, but I came back and I checked it out on a kind of a fast replay. So I feel pretty well versed in the game.
Bruntz?
I saw, I would say, about half. I watched enough to be able to speak intelligently about it.
Okay. All right. Well, that's good. We've got our Colorado panel here. Let's discuss. Brian, what stood out to you about the Deion Sanders version of Colorado football?
His son, I mean, Shadur at quarterback, I just thought, like, anytime you complete 81% of your passes, no matter, what's facing you on defense. And that, look, TCU returned 8 starters from last year, so it wasn't like they didn't have some material. I don't know how prepared they were for what they saw. And the thing you also don't know is how much TCU tackled in August and like hit. And I think sometimes you see in the first week teams pay a price that didn't do enough of that. And that's a big point in this game. We're going to see if it matters or not. Nebraska definitely hit a lot and they tackled really well in the first week. So if they can carry that over, some of those explosive plays like the, Dylan Edwards had, ideally those are 4-yard plays, against you, and TCU let them become 45, 50-yard house calls. So that's what stood out to me the most, was just how great young players were on that stage. You've got to give a lot of credit. I mean, Dylan Edwards, we knew he was a really good recruit. We covered that. So that doesn't surprise us that he's going to be a good college player, but to do what he did in the first game, we'd be going nuts about a guy doing that in his first game. And, Travis Hunter, you go back and look at his recruiting profile, he was thought to be the best receiver in that class and the best cornerback in that class. So he's a freak. I mean, he just is. And I think what stood out to me is Nebraska is going to have to do a better job than TCU did if he's going to go both ways, of making every play that he's out there like you're giving him attention and you're giving him a workout, and so when he's at corner, you gotta hit him. You gotta, when you get chances to block and hit him, you gotta try to bring some fatigue to him and make him pay if he's going to play 100 snaps in this game. So that to me is going to be an interesting component, kind of thinking about what was and what needs to be for Nebraska.
Bruntz, I'm going to remove Jeff Sims because I feel like that's probably the obvious answer. But beyond Jeff Sims, who else has to be an X factor? Like either side of the ball, could be special teams for Nebraska if they're going to go into Colorado and win that game.
Yeah, I think it's got to be up front on defense for Nebraska, I think. This is going to be a game where each team is going to want to play the bulk of the snaps at its own tempo. Colorado's going to want to go fast. Nebraska's going to want to slow it down and grind things out and shorten the game. And I mean, as you guys know, a truly disruptive defensive line can help so much, help a defense so much when you're facing speed, the quick game, all that stuff. Because I don't know that Nebraska is going to be able to sit back there and just, let Sanders move around the pocket. They're going to have to force the issue a little bit. And you don't have Ty Robinson in the first half. I'd point to a guy like Nash Hutmacher. If he can be really disruptive in the middle of that defense, collapse the pocket, and kind of make Sanders uncomfortable, early in a play, I think that's huge. I mean, I think basically in that game with Colorado and TCU, I mean, TCU signed itself up for a 7-on-7 game, and Colorado was more than willing to play that style and play with the guys that they've got. I mean, that is a recipe that's going to be really bad for Nebraska on Saturday if it comes to that. So if they can get that defensive line to be disruptive, to get guys in and out of there, and then bring in a fresh Ty Robinson in the second half, I think that would be huge, because as you start bringing pressure from different areas and having to force the issue that way, that's when you start leaving yourself open for athletes in space and having to tackle in space, and you set yourself up for giving up big plays. So that defensive line, I think, is going to need to have a really big game and be disruptive.
BC, are there any players that we didn't see against Minnesota that you anticipate could either debut or return from injury against Colorado?
I don't know. Henrich was out there on Tuesday running around, but I wouldn't say, yeah. So I don't know what that means. Well, why are you laughing? What do you got to say?
I don't know. It's just a mental image of like there's a practice going on and like Nick Henrich is just like doing laps around the field.
It's
Just
like
run it.
Kind of like my baseball team would practice, and I'd just be running poles because I didn't have anything else to do.
it's like I don't know.
That's what I'm wondering.
I can picture that. It's like when my family went to church when I was a kid, and you go to like Village Inn afterwards, and people talk for like too long, and the kids start to run around the restaurant. So yeah, I don't think that's what he was doing, but I don't know that he's cleared for sure. That's gonna, I think, be kind of a game time. I didn't hear as much on Jamari Butler. Rule did say early in the week that was still just sort of a maybe. You're playing it day by day. So I guess those are the two to watch. Other than that, they came out of the game really good defensively, aside from the Ty Robinson targeting suspension that'll play over a half. So that's going to be tough to work around because Ty played really well. Like Ty and Nash both played really good football. And then you talk about encouraging things. Like, I don't think we should just gloss over, and I'm not saying we are, but Nash was a guy who was like a fringe guy on this defense a year ago. And he was a true disruptor in game one. Like, he made that jump, not just to a guy who's okay, but like he was a problem for Minnesota. So Bruntz's point was perfect. I love the 7-on-7 stuff because Nebraska's got to make this an 11-on-11 game and make Colorado. I think the area people wonder about them is in the trenches and like what they're really about. And sometimes odd as it is in football, you can work around that a little bit if you can get the ball out quick. And that's what TCU allowed that game to be. And Nebraska needs to, as Bruntz pointed out really well, not have it be that. So this is going to be a big game, though, for Cam Lenhart and Prince Will. And, I would think Judy is going to get a lot of snaps. He played 21 snaps and is actually one of their better pass rushers if he can keep growing. Ruquan Buckley, I would guess, might get some more snaps in this game than a couple he had. So those guys all have to make the most of their reps in the first half. And then Ty Robinson's just got to make the most out of, like, this is a bad deal, but use it to your advantage in the second half where you're the freshest guy who's just a problem child for them the whole way to the finish.
A follow up with you, Brian. Have we heard any more on Malachi Coleman? I mean, that's probably the player I've been asked about the most since the Thursday game. He didn't play. He was a high profile recruit. Did Matt Rule speak at all on him this week? My general stock answer has been it's going to take some time for him to probably be at the point where he's going to contribute as a wide receiver beyond just maybe a gadget play here or there. But I'm curious if Malachi Coleman specifically came up at all or if we've heard anything there.
I don't think we've heard anything this week. I know going into the opener, though, that Malachi is like on the cusp of maybe being a contributor, and it wasn't sure if it was going to happen right away or if it might be week 4 or 5 or 6, So I think people do have to have a little patience with that. I think Jalen Lloyd's going to be important, though. We already saw him out there and get the ball, and he's a speed guy. I think Tommy Hill's a wild card. When he came in for that one play, they were confident he was going to run past Minnesota, and watch that one back. He did, like, more so than I even thought, like, from the press box. That was the game. Like, if that throws there, it's over. And it's a whole different conversation around here that week. That's a thin line of football, isn't it? Like, you make that play and
Marcus Satterfield's a hero instead of everyone just dumping on him in every possible way.
Talking about that series in a bad way if that ball's there, because he was past him. And as well as anyone, Schaefer and Andrew Ivins covered Tommy Hill probably as good as any analyst. Colorado's got some freak athletes. Tommy Hill's a freak athlete. And the thing that was interesting when he was brought up this week was Rule said he's also a tenacious blocker, like if you go back and look at it. So I wonder if he gets out there a little bit more and you get him on Travis Hunter and you work on that a little bit. So
a little TH action there, Tommy versus Travis.
Yeah, could be. We're both great athletes, but the Malachi thing is, I think people don't need to be discouraged about that. He's a young player. I think we knew going in he wasn't going to play a lot right off the bat. And there's some other guys sort of in the wings. We'll see over time if Jaden Doss later in the season gets thrown out there and things like that. But Jalen Lloyd is a guy who I'd love to see him take a deep shot with Jalen Lloyd too, just to show you can. And you talk about good throws for Jeff Sims. I don't mind those plays because the worst case scenario usually is like a guy picks it off 50 yards down the field, if it, or it's incomplete, whatever, you can live with that. But you make the defense think, okay, they're going to at least have this in their arsenal and they're going to try it. We have to be aware of that. And maybe that opens some things up. So I do think Nebraska needs to hit one big pass play in this game. It's got, that covers like 40, 50 yards that gets everybody going a little bit. I think that's important.
All right. Bruntz, you're gonna get the radio guy question here. Should we be concerned about Nebraska's ability to play at altitude?
No. So I think you have to be smart. Like, you don't make it more than it is. I mean, you're preparing. You get 9 days to prepare. I mean, what can you really do? I mean, I get it. I mean, Nebraska's not going to try to go gangbusters with pace. I mean, I think it's something you have to be aware of with your defense, and rotating guys in. But I think this team defensively, as long as they can get, some stops, will be okay. I mean, I think they're going to be a little bit more hard pressed to rotate as much as they did last week against Minnesota. But, I do know in 2019, they had some issues in the secondary with guys, kind of getting run down in the second half. I think part of that was the way that they handled special teams, and personnel there. I know I've been told that by players that were in that game that was an issue. But no, I mean, I think you're aware of it. You don't make it a huge deal so it gets in guys' heads, but you just got to be smart with rotations. And I think Matt Rule will do that. And it also too kind of goes back to the way that you conditioned in the summer. Like, if you're, doing more running and, the types of things that you need to do to prepare for the altitude, or just prepare in general, I mean, I think he'll be fine. So I'm not too concerned about it.
All right. Any other things that we want to cover here before we come to a close?
Do you
Anything that GP needs to know, BC?
Do you guys think too much has been made of, as well as Colorado played in week 1, like their athletes and sort of like basically like their Miami 1992 already, because they won a game 45-42. I kind of expressed my opinion there within the question. But
I think, just like with the Nebraska-Minnesota game, despite the fact that we have years of evidence that the first week of the season can be a little bit wonky and it doesn't always show you the full picture of what's to come, everyone loses perspective. And then the way that they went out and they showed up and they're a competent football team. I mean, there was people like me that had a lot of doubt that they could transition as big of a roster transition as they did and then play, competent football. And they did that. And part of it felt like TCU sort of allowed Colorado to play to its strengths and stick to its strengths. But it was a 3-point win on the road against a ranked team that I really don't know if they're going to win 6 games this year. I came away more unenthused about TCU than I was impressed by Colorado. Does that make sense? Like, TCU's got some real issues. And maybe Colorado just exposed everything and they're going to be completely fine. But you just look around college football on Saturday, beyond that game too, lots of teams had issues coming out of the gates. Like, that's what happens in week 1 every year. And, I jokingly say this every single year, but there's a lot of truth to it. And you talk to the coaches in the profession and they absolutely believe it. Big jumps happen from week 1 to week 2. Like, you get to clean some stuff up. You get to go against a different opponent. You get to see something different. You get to see, something that isn't your team's defense or your defensive end or your cornerback, when you're on offense, and then the reverse when you're on defense. So all of that being baked into it, I shouldn't have been as surprised by the reaction as I was on Thursday, but I still think Nebraska can go into Colorado. I think they can play a certain style. I think they can make life difficult on Colorado. And given the way the game ended for Nebraska on Thursday, you could make the case, and I think Brian has, where probably the best result that could have happened was Colorado beating TCU. A lot of excitement and enthusiasm and hype just surrounding everything that Deion Sanders is doing. And then Nebraska gets a chance to go to Boulder and try to make it a phone booth game like they just played in Minnesota. So if they're able to do that, if they're able to take how they played up front against Minnesota and they take it to Colorado, I don't think you're going to see 45 points from the Buffaloes. I don't know how many points Nebraska can score. I mean, legitimately, that is a real concern. But I think this is going to be another lower scoring game. And I think Nebraska has a chance to be in this till the end. And frankly, I mean, I thought they were a better team 2 weeks ago. So why am I changing that radically right now? So I think Nebraska absolutely has a chance to win this game. Bruntz?
Yeah, no, I do too. I mean, like I said, I mean, it's going to come down to which tempo wins out. Because I think if Nebraska makes it into a 4-quarter kind of boxing match, I think that's the type of game that they're going to win. I do have concerns about some of the things that I saw from Jeff Sims in that opener. I think I'm still trying to get a kind of wrap my mind around what this offense is going to be, because it just seemed a little bit a little slapdash in game one. You had some good things, some things that I didn't really understand the decision making behind it, and I'm kind of eager to see how that looks this weekend. I'm not surprised that the national reaction has been what it is to Colorado. I mean, it is a story. It's a significant story. I mean, they flipped the roster. They, were terrible last year.
And they deserve credit. Like, I don't want that to come off.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think, they've obviously got elite skill guys on the front line that you have to be really concerned about. So, it is still just the second game of the Matt Rule era, and we're going to figure out, kind of what they can do adjustment wise from week 1 to week 2 and week to week and different opponents. So I'm eager to see how that goes, but I'm not surprised by the reaction. And I agree with Brian's point that in some ways, it does kind of set up well for Nebraska to be focused this week going into the game.
Anything you want to add, Brian?
No, you guys, I was just curious what you thought. I thought it was interesting when Tony White was asked on the radio about Colorado's speed. He didn't downplay it or by any means. He was respectful of it, but I don't know. I wonder if they think it's that much different than any other speed you're going to see from some really good teams this year. And as he pointed out, really speed, you say a team is fast when they know what they're doing. Like if Nebraska's defense feels confident in how they're lined up before the snap and all that stuff, Nebraska, I think, can match the speed because you just play fast when you know what you're doing, and because everybody on the field is close to 4.4, 4.5. That's just the way it is. Maybe 1 or 2 guys is beyond that. So I just wonder about that. I do think there's sort of this thought that Colorado has all the speed and is going to run around Nebraska. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe they will, and then we'll be in awe of it. But I still question that. So that's going to be interesting to me.
Do you think there's any advantage that Nebraska gets to the fact that Matt Rule spent the last 2.5 years in the NFL? So part of it, all of the talk about speed, and you kind of mentioned that. I mean, he's coming from the best football that there was. So it's not like the idea that Dylan Edwards can outrun some people is going to be like a shock. It's not like they haven't seen that level of athleticism. It's not like he hasn't game planned against that level of athleticism and had to do it for, I don't know, 40 some games before he was let go for the Panthers, whatever his record was there. So there's a part of me that almost feels like, in a way, they should have not necessarily an advantage, but it shouldn't catch any of them by that much surprise. I mean, half of those guys on their staff spent last year with the Panthers. They were around NFL dudes. Colorado's skill guys shouldn't leave them, floored. And I would think that could kind of be passed off to the players too.
Yeah, you would think so. The other thing about it is, I mean, Colorado's got a young roster. Nebraska's playing some young guys too, but there are going to be growing pains for them at points this season. The question is whether Nebraska can make Saturday one of those, days where it's obvious, oh yeah, everybody remembers Dylan Edwards is barely in college football, some of these guys. And maybe they won't. Maybe they won't come down to earth this week, and it'll continue for a bit. But so it's a fascinating game, and we knew this would be a high-profile one going into it, but Colorado winning has made it. It's going to be one of the more watched games, I think, in college football, like in September. Just because of the attention that Deion Sanders commands. And Rule has said, and it's respectful, but I think true, like it's good for college football. Like this is a sort of stuff that gets everyone all going, whatever you think of the other side, good or bad. People have opinions on it. And these are the type of games college football needs that aren't just being played in the Southeastern Conference. It's a game here in the middle of the country that everybody's going to be dialed into.
Bruntz, final thought?
I'm excited for this game. I am kind of going off what you just said. I think
the excitement just exploding out of that video screen right there. If you're watching on YouTube, Bruntz just gave like 15 fist pumps when he said he's excited for that game. You couldn't tell from his voice, but he's out there running around his coffee table. He's fired up.
I'm running around like Nick Henrich.
I mean, we're gonna have to, like, BC's gonna have to calm him down so he doesn't drive 150 miles an hour out to Boulder. You got to be safe here, Bruntz. Let's try to contain it a little bit. Save some for the Hypecast.
I was doing some research on starting field position. I was sorry. I'm just a barrel of excitement over here.
Unbelievable. That's great. All right, let's bring both of you and myself back. We'll go find a friend. We'll have a Hypecast. That'll come up later this week. That'll get people even more fired up for Nebraska, Colorado. Maybe, you know what, to make things easy, I'll just ask you guys to tell me about 1992, the Halloween game. We'll just make that a thing. It comes up on, I would say it's probably been discussed on this podcast at least 7 times. So we'll make it 8 in the Hypecast. People can look forward to that. They can check out everything that'll be on Husker247.com. Plenty of coverage from the week already. I will be at Omaha Westside Bell West on Friday, so we'll have coverage of that game as well. I'm trying to figure out if there's a good Thursday game to get to. It's fully high school football season after not being able to make a few games. I'm all in. I'm going to be at games for most of the rest of the year, and I'm looking forward to seeing some of Nebraska's commits and targets. So check out everything we got at Husker247. For Brian Christopherson, Michael Bruntz, I'm Mike Schaefer. We're Husker247. We'll catch you at that Hypecast later this week.